Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we are joined by Jon Hobbs, who's physiotherapist and also chairman of the AACP. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about his story and how he got started in this area. So Jon, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Welcome, Andy. Yeah, it's good to be here, mate.
Great. So also I will say that the pubs have actually opened today on this as well. So I do appreciate you staying around for this one.
Well, do you know what? I'm asking if you could have done it tomorrow. I'm getting my hair cut tomorrow. It looks a little bit better for that. So I was thinking, could we reschedule for tomorrow?
Yeah, no, I need to do mine as well. So no excuses on that one. So anyway, kicking off then. So Jon, where are you from and how did you get started in the realm of physiotherapy?
Yeah, a bit of a story there. So I'm from Birmingham originally. Don't live there now. I'm in Stoke-on-Trent now. But I started out, oddly enough, I started out in the music business. Not in physio, not in exercise, anything like that. I was in the music business. I was a drummer, worked in recording studios, recorded for a number of bands, toured, headlined festivals. If you look hard enough, you can find me on Spotify playing in some bands as well still. So that's what I did for a good while. And then what happened is touring like constantly, sitting on the drum stool, sitting in the van. What happens is I started to develop what I thought at the time was sciatica. Went to the GP and everyone said, oh, it's a disc problem, you've got sciatica. Then I was told I'd got ankylosing spondylitis. And I went to see a physio, which was actually two things about it. One, it was good because they saw me within a week. And two, it was bad because basically they just put me in a room, put a pulse shortwave on me and just left me there for half an hour. I came back in and said, right, you can go home now. But the only thing that he did was any good was to tell me to stand up straight. So I was crouched on the kit and I was crouched in the van and things like that. But the back pain kind of continued really. Around that time, I discovered martial arts. So back then when I had back pain, which was 30 odd years ago, I was told to just lie down, not do anything, don't exercise, the worst thing you can do. But I'd started training martial arts. So I was doing a lot of stretching, I was doing a lot of exercise, I was at home by myself. So I was running through routines and things. And I found I was actually getting better. The more things I did, the more exercise I did, the better I got. And that got me interested in training. I went on to become a personal trainer from there, and that kind of kept the back pain at bay. I left the whole music industry because it was physically, it was quite like a toxic environment. You know, it's not great, all the smoking and drinking and partying and things like that. It all sounds good, but do it all the time, it takes its sort of toll on you physically. And I was getting more into health and fitness and with the martial arts, the personal training. And then I found that I just wasn't, I suppose, getting to where I wanted to be, in the sense that I didn't feel like I was learning enough in the realms I was in with like personal training. I kind of felt that I'd reached a kind of ceiling with that, with my knowledge, and I wanted to know more. So I was looking to sort of develop that a little bit more. And at the time, I was working partly for the NHS and partly for like myself, doing my own things. And I had a very bad experience at work one day, and was put in a position by a boss that I wasn't very happy with. So I just got up and walked out of work one day, and got up, just walked out in the middle of the day. Decided I don't want to be here anymore. This is not where my life is. So just walked out. It wasn't until I got outside work that I realised and remembered that I got a lift to work, and I was working miles away from home. And I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? A bus was coming past. I jumped on the bus, and then just sat there kind of in a daze. I walked out of work, rode this bus for about half an hour, realised I didn't know where the bus was going, got off the bus and walked home. And that was a pivotal point in my life, because I realised at that point I was never going to do anything that I didn't want to do again. And that was about 30 years ago. Got home, didn't know what to do, got in my camper van, and I went to Devon on holiday and never came back. And so I stayed there. Ended up getting a job. Was looking for a personal training job. There was no jobs there. I ended up working in a printers, because I'd worked in a printers before for the NHS. So I was working in a printing press. The second day I went into work, the guy I was working for had been burgled, and he decided he didn't want his business anymore. So he asked me if I wanted his business on the second day of working there, and I said, well, I hadn't got any money. He said, it's fine, have the business and pay me back when you got some money. So I ended up with my own business in printing, which I had for a while. And then I decided I hated printing. I wanted to be a personal trainer. I was helping out a friend who was a boxer, and I was doing some stuff with him, and friends were commenting that, oh, you should become a physio, because they mentioned that a friend of theirs was a physio, and you know about exercise, so you should maybe go and do that. I didn't really know what physio was at the time. So I went to college, do an access course. So I did an access course in the mornings from 9 till 12 every morning, and then from 1 till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, I worked in the printers. So I sold my printers and then went back to work in it for the guy who bought it. And so I went to college in the morning, went to work at night, did my homework at night, got up the next morning, went to work, and I did that for 12 months until I could get access, the access course completed to get to uni. Applied for lots of unis, didn't get in any of them, was turned down by them all. Only got an interview for 2, both of them turned me down after the interview. And then what happened is I managed to find that I was on a clearing list for one of the universities. And so I'd phone them up every Friday and ask what was happening as far as the clearing. And every week I'd speak to the same lady who worked in admissions, and she would tell me that all the places had gone, and I was maybe like 5th on the waiting list. Phone her up the next week, all the places are gone, you're 4th on the waiting list. 3rd, 2nd, 1st, week after week after week, speaking to the same lady, so much so that when the phone would ring, she'd pick it up and go, "Hi, John," even before I'd speak. She was the same time, like every week I'd phone her. And we'd start chatting about family and things like that, because I was getting to know her. The final week, I phoned her up and said, "Is there any chance?" And she said, "No." She said, "You're number 1 on the list, but there are absolutely 100% no places left." And I said, "Nothing at all? No, I couldn't just squeeze in there." And she said, "Well, we're waiting for one guy to get back." And I was like, "Hold on a minute, you're telling me you're waiting for someone to get back to you? I phoned you every week for 6 weeks. I said, when did you tell him he got a place?" And she was like, "Well, about 3 weeks ago." He's known for 3 weeks and he's not come back to you to confirm that. I'm phoning you every week and you're turning me down. And then she said, "Well, he's not in the country." I'm like, "And they don't have phones there? He's got no access to anything." And I said to her, "Look," I said, "I'm phoning you every week and showing you this level of commitment, and he can't even bother to get back to you, but you're going to give him a place." I said, "Do you think that's right?" And she said, "Look, just leave it with me." And she went away.
How old were you then?
I was, how old was I then? I was 20, I was just coming up for 26, I think. So maybe I was 25, 26.
Yeah.
Like that. And she went away, and I got a phone call later when I was at college. And I got a phone call, and I was in a lecture, and somebody came in, spoke to the lecturer. The lecturer came over, spoke to me, said, "Come to my office now." And I thought, "Oh, I'm in trouble." Brought me into her office, and phone was there, and someone on the phone for you. I'm like, "God, what's happened? Is it a family thing?" Picked it up. It's Anne from the uni, and she said, "Jons, yeah." She said, "Are you standing up?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Sit down." And so I sat down. She goes, "You know that place?" She said, "We've had a discussion about it. We decided to give it to you instead, because you've ground us down over all these weeks, and we've decided to give it you over that other guy." I don't know who he is. I apologise to him, whoever he is. But yeah, so they gave me that. I ended up getting a first class degree. So one of only like 2 guys to get one, and the other guy had already got a degree in sports science. So
where were you studying at, John?
I studied at Keele. Went to Keele Uni, which is just outside Stoke, which is where I live now. So that was my convoluted journey into physio. It was never a thing as a kid. I was awful at sports. I was born with a congenital heart disorder. So I had heart surgery when I was 10 days old. And it was fairly experimental at the time. It transpires that the majority of kids who had my condition, I was born in '69, so majority of kids who had my condition died. Those that had surgery, because there was a surgeon who was trying some groundbreaking stuff at the end of the 60s. Bear in mind, I was only like 10, 11 days old. The majority of kids who had surgery died. Those that survived the surgery, a fair percentage of those died of kidney failure. But none of that was realised at the time, because that happened sort of over time. So I had surgery in the 60s, and then I had it again in the 70s. At 78, I had surgery. Back then, there was no cardiac rehab. I was told not to exercise. In fact, I was told not to play out. For 3 months after going back to school, I had to sit in class while everyone else played out. And I had to sit in and do extra homework and things like that, until I eventually pestered a teacher a young female teacher. I pestered her so many times to let me go and play out. I think she felt so sorry for me. She let me go and play out as long as I didn't tell anyone. I'm telling people now, but as long as I didn't tell anyone, as long as I didn't run around. And so cardiac rehab was not a thing back then. I was told not to do any exercise. So as a result, I grew up overweight, not exercising. And I was, by that time, I didn't play any sports, and I didn't have much physical conditioning. So anytime I played a sport, I was exhausted. So my sporting kind of interests and training interests came much later. They actually came as a result of being in a band and being in a rock band and taking my shirt off and playing the drums and wanting to be in better shape. And that's where my exercise base came from. That's where physio came from, vanity of music, oddly enough. So yeah, that's my bizarre journey into physio.
That is definitely a random one. That's
random, isn't it?
That's really interesting. So do you think that the fact that you got a first then, do you think that was down to you being a mature student? Did that help you that you'd come from that delayed area?
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a couple of things about that. I've got quite marked dyslexia. So when I was at school, I was thrown out of school, and I left with very few qualifications, if any, of any value. And basically, what happened was because I couldn't read very well. It was my generation wasn't really picked up, and so I was just not very bright. And so what happened was, my biggest fear, oddly enough, was public speaking. It was bizarre because that's how I make my living these days, or much of it. So my biggest fear was public speaking because I couldn't read. And so what would happen in class in primary school is that we'd be reading a book, and every pupil would have to read a different page of the book at the end of the day, and it would work around the class. So what I would do is I would count how many children were in front of me, and I would go home that night and I would memorize the entire page of the book. And so when I went back to school the next day and I had to read, it was memorized. So one of the deficiencies of my ability to read live work, I can read, but I have to read with my finger under the line and so on. So one of the deficiencies that I had there became a strength because I had to develop my recall and my memory and the ability to access that information. The only problem was I would turn up in class and then somebody would be off sick. So I'd now have to memorize another page in the 10 minutes before it got to me, which was quite stressful. So I ended up in secondary school getting thrown out of school for having getting into an argument with an English teacher because I was so self-conscious about reading out. I developed a fake cough to cover the fact that I would struggle, and that started an argument. He kicked me out and he said, "Go away and don't come back." So that's what I did. And so I ended up with some rubbish jobs, ended up being a band, music business, and that sort of thing. When I came to do physio, going back to what you're saying about the maturity, there's a couple of things there that I think secured that first. One, I got to a point where I thought, this is my last chance. I'd already been told going into uni that I was too old to do it, which is very different now. But at the time, 20, 25 years ago, I was told I was too old, and that played on my mind. And also, in my mind, I wasn't going back to stacking shelves and packing boxes and things that I'd done in the past. I thought, I'm not going to go back to that. It was an area and a time that I wasn't happy with in my life when I had to do those sorts of jobs. I didn't feel that it was me. It's fine if you feel it's you, but I didn't feel it was me. And I felt like I wanted to do more. So when I was sat up at night, 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock, doing homework and assignments, my overriding driver was, I'm not going back to where I've been. I have to succeed because I can't go back. And then that other skill set from memory works really well for physio because of the anatomy, the physiology, those sort of concepts. I can retain those and I can draw them back down because I trained myself to do it as a child, because it was my only way of not being, not being exposed to other people's negativity. So I use that as like a positive to do that. So these days when I lecture, and if I lecture in anatomy or anything like that, I can recall those things down, I can pull those things down, which is quite useful for physio. So when you're problem solving and you're clinically reasoning, and you're thinking, I'm talking to students about how they clinically reason, talk about things like understanding what the pathophysiology of the problem is and the mechanism of the modality, and how these kind of fit together. So you can problem solve if you know the physiological mechanisms, if you know the anatomy, if you know the mechanics and so on, biomechanics, the physics. You can solve problems. You don't need to know the answer to be able to solve it, you know. So I'm quite good at those sorts of things. So yeah, I think being older and being more mature, having done things that I didn't like and not wanting to go back to those, but also being able to pull those things from that dyslexia, kind of create like a bit of a perfect storm, I suppose, for me. And I think that was an advantage to me. You know, so.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Because like, yeah, mature students, you kind of got these conventional paths, but for me, it would have made a lot more sense, I think, I've been way better at making decisions in terms of going a little bit later. But when you were at university then, so what was your thoughts then in terms of, did you know what job you wanted to go into?
Yeah, I was always going to work in the NHS forever. That's what I was going to do, and that lasted 12 months. Yeah, my goal was I wanted to be a physio. I wanted to be an MSK physio. Liked exercise, loved exercise. Exercise was my thing. Never had any aspirations to do anything else. I wanted to work in an NHS outpatient department and give out exercises forever. And I would have been happy with that thought. And then I discovered a few things along the way. I ended up discovering acupuncture, and that was an odd one. I was at work one day, and I was what was called a junior physio then, but it's now band 5. And I'd woken up with a neck problem. So very tight. I got like a wry neck. So I sat at my desk with my neck like this, writing my notes. One of my colleagues walked past, who was much more senior. And she looked at me and she said, "What's wrong with your neck?" And I explained that I got up, my neck was stiff. I said, "Okay, come here." Took me into a cubicle, lay me down on a bed. And without saying anything, she just nipped my neck. Just nipped it. And then walked off and left me lying on the bed without any like warning or anything. And so I got off the bed and my neck went into spasm and got worse. So I like walked back to my desk like this and I sat down. I carried on writing my notes. Another senior physio walked past. I said, "John, what's up with your neck?" Told her the story of waking up, and then I told her what the other physio had done, and she just like rolled her eyes, said, "Come with me." I thought, what's going to happen now? Went into a cubicle, lay down. How trusted am I at that point? You know, lay down, and she proceeded to put needles in my hands and feet. And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm doing some acupuncture." I said, "You do realise my problem's in my neck, don't you?" She goes, "Don't worry, I got this." And so she put some needles in my hands and feet. I'm like, "Can we do acupuncture?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's a thing." I'm like, "Is it really?" And because I've done a lot of martial arts in the past, I was a little bit intrigued with the whole kind of Eastern idea of it to start with. I'm much more Western now, but at the time, I was interested in the whole mystique of it all. And so she needled me, and it felt kind of weird, and it felt okay. And I got up, and my neck felt fine, and the spasm went away, and I felt relaxed, and I carried on, and it just kind of like planted a seed in me. And then I ended up doing like a foundation, like acupuncture course, and then it kind of like grew from there. So that's kind of yeah, that was me starting out with that in physio. But yeah, I always thought it was going to be an NHS, and then what happened is I had a bizarre situation where I applied for a job and I didn't get it, and I was it was kind of weird because I walked into work the next day only to be congratulated by everyone for getting the job, and I had to say, "Well, I didn't get it." And that was a bit of a pivotal moment for me, because at that time I was then offered a job in football. I was doing some part-time at Port Vale, and I'd done some work for them, and I had the bizarrest job interview. Actually, I was doing some part-time for them, and I got a phone call from one of the physios there, and he said, "Oh, do you want to come down and have a chat about stuff at the club?" So I was like, "Yeah, okay." Things weren't going well for me in the NHS. I was a little bit upset about the failure of the job interview. So one lunchtime, I went to the club, just walked in, and as I did, the lads were coming in from training, and there was kind of like an overweight middle-aged guy. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this now, but there's an overweight middle-aged guy, and the physio, the physio and I just like went into a room, and it wasn't very sort of salubrious or anything. We just kind of like sat in this breeze block, kind of looked like a caretaker's kind of like room with a wooden desk in it and stuff. And we sat there. "You're a physio then?" I'm like, "Yeah." He looked at the other physio and told him to leave the room, although he didn't say it like that. He says, "You get out." And I'm just sat there, and he starts chatting about stuff and talking about like physio. I want to tell him I've done some work in rugby and I was doing a bit of work in football. He said my name had come up a few times in conversations, and yeah, it was. And then he wrote a number on a piece of paper and just pushed it across the table to me, and that's what happened. It was like a post-it note, and I looked at it, and it was a good number. It was much better than the number I was getting where I was. But then I said, oh, what about increments, and what about, you know, yearly upgrades and that? And he muttered something under his breath that you wouldn't want to repeat. And then he took the piece of paper back, wrote it on there, pushed it back to me, and I looked at it, and I was like, still a lot more, and it was getting more and more now, but I thought, yeah, I'll probably push my luck now. So I just said to him, oh, I'll go away and think about it. And his reply was, don't take all flipping day. And I left the room. And then I got in the car and I drove back to work, and I get back to lunch, and one of my mates is there, and he said, where have you been? I said, I don't know. I said, I think I had a job interview, but I'm not sure. And he said, what happened? And I explained to him. And he said, what was the bloke's name? And I said, it was like Brian. He said, oh, he's the gaffer. I was like, who's the gaffer? He's like, the manager. You know, and I'm like, okay. And so I went home and thought about it. And I thought, do you know what? I fancy a career change. So I phoned him back, and he was in a restaurant, and he said, yeah, glad you're coming on board, son. When you starting tomorrow? And I'm like, no, I've got to give like a month's notice at work. And he goes, oh, you haven't got to do any of that. And he starts effing and jeffing on the phone, and I can hear people ordering food in the background, and he's like proper old school. And he's just effing and jeffing all the way through. And he goes, get yourself down here tomorrow, son. You go tell them to clear off. And I was like, well, you know, I have this idea that you never want to walk out of a room you can't walk back into. So I didn't want to leave the NHS on bad terms. And so, which was lucky, because I actually called on some of those managers in the future when I was lecturing at a uni and I wanted a course validating. I called on a couple of those guys that I'd maybe clashed with a little bit after the job interview, but I'd kept my professionalism over it. There was a few things going on with that, but I stayed sort of calm and professional. And that was really useful, because that was a life lesson. Because when I called on them to come and do something for the uni, you know, they turned up and they were very, very gracious and very self-effacing. And I thought perhaps because of the way I dealt with the issues before, they were returning the favour, because they were much more gracious with me when they came to university and spoke very highly of me and the work and things like that I was doing there, than we'd had when we were in the NHS together. So I was very grateful of their support. But yeah, so that's how I got into from physio to football. Yeah, so
What Vale for then?
I was with them for a season, and then somebody came to me and offered me. I was doing some part-time work in the evenings, and it was for a private clinic, and they basically came to me and asked me if I'd run their clinic. So the football was going okay. I got no problems with it. It was a really bad season weather-wise. We're going back to like 2000. Weather was shocking. Lots of games were lost kind of like early part of the season. Stuff was rescheduled. We were going all over and doing stuff and trying to cram games in because lots of snow, lots of rain, so all the pitches were getting cut up and stuff. So yeah, it was an okay season. LDB championship season, so it was a good season for the Vale. And what happened then is, yeah, I got offered to run a private clinic, which was kind of nice. It was the clinic was owned by a lady that I'd known for a little while. I'd been doing some work for her for a while, and she got some faith in me. So she asked me if I would run the entire physio side, and she was very supportive of everything. So it was a good opportunity for me to go into that. The hours were a little bit better. The money was a lot better. And I could control what I did. You know, I'd got a couple of kids at the time. And so, you know, in football, you know, you're paid for 36 hours, you're doing 70, you know, and you're out all the time. And then the thing is as well, a game turns up, you never know where you're going to be. Sometimes you need to come back in for a player and things like that. You're 7 days a week. So the private was a good opportunity for me with the kids coming along. So I went to do that. And I did that for a while. And then whilst I was doing that, I also was offered a job locuming for a week. And so I took that locum job for a week. And so it was a week-on-week rolling contract. 5 years later, I still had the same contract. And so I was I was getting locum rates, which were considerably higher than regular rates, because you're only paid for a week normally, and then you need to clear off. But basically, the trust that I was working for couldn't recruit, so they would just roll my contract on week after week after week after week. And then after 5 years, I was in clinic one day and I got a phone call, and it was from the head of therapies. And she phoned me up and I answered the phone. It's like, "Oh, Jon, yeah, we're going to have to let you go now. We've not got any money for locums. We've kept you longer than everyone else because you never complained. You always did everything we wanted. You always did the jobs nobody wanted. You always went and did those. So we kept you longer than anyone else. But you must have done really well out of us. You must have been here at least 2 years," is what she said. And I said, "Funny you should mention it, because at the end of this week, it's exactly 5 years." And it just went quiet on the end of the phone. And I'm like, "Hello?" She was like, "Okay." And then hung the phone. I'm like, somebody's in trouble. Somebody hasn't done their accounting very well, have they? So yes, I was there for 5 years. And what was really good about that is I took all the jobs that nobody wanted to do. And what that taught me was all the things that nobody else knew. And that was really useful when it came to the things that I teach and the things that I do now, and problem solving and things like that. So as a hired hand, I just was sent to places, and I just had to go and do those. And I was brought in to reduce waiting lists, do triage, and do all sorts of different things, whether it was mental health or oncology or palliative, or musculoskeletal, pediatrics, neuro, respiratory. It was everything. So whilst everyone else was just focusing on doing what they wanted to do, which was what I'd wanted to do, which was just necks and backs and shoulders and knees, things like that, all day long, I was now doing lots and lots and lots of different things. And at the same time, I was working in a private clinic because my children were very young, so I was working there for the income. I'd also started a master's degree in acupuncture. I happened to be working in a clinic one day, and a lady came in that I'd met before. She was a senior physio. She was a physio manager, actually. I'd met her some years before. So I'd met her when, I'll just make a note of this because I'm going to forget what I'm going to say in a minute. When I was a physio student, I was looking for a job. My physio degree wasn't funded by my parents or anything like that, because I was an older sort of guy, so I had to go to work to try and fund my life. So I ended up working in a mental health hospital, and that comes back later on as some of the other things I did. So I went to work in this hospital, and my only experience of mental health prior to that was a single lecture that I'd done in, I think, the second year at uni. And we used to have these lectures. Sometimes it'd be the whole group, and sometimes it would be smaller groups. But what happened is we had an external lecturer come who was presenting mental health, and she was talking about what they call MAPA, management of aggression and perceived aggression, and breakaway. So how you get away from someone when they try to attack you. And so she wanted smaller groups. And so there was about 40 odd in my cohort, and she didn't want any more than about 10 or 12 people in a group. And the cohort is split into A, B, C, D. And so when we do practicals, it's like, A and C go here, B and D go over there. And so it's split up through the year, and that happens depending on the lecture. So basically, she says she's going to do 4 lectures, and she's going to start with A. Now, I'm close to the beginning of the alphabet, so I sit in the A group. But then what happened is the girl in the group complained that she didn't want to wait. She was in like T to Z or something like that in the D group, and it wasn't fair. She was always last. She didn't want to wait. So basically what happened is the lecturer decided he's going to flip the groups around. And so now A would be at the end of the day. Now, I didn't live on campus. It was in the morning. So we got lectures, lunch, a couple more lectures, and then mine at the end of the day. So it's like 10 o'clock in the morning. And now I've got to wait till 4 o'clock in the afternoon for my lecture. So I thought, oh, sod that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'll go in the B lecture a little bit later on. So I come in, I sit down in the B lecture. I'm there, sit at the front, don't want to draw attention, but I'll sit there. And she walks in, she looks around the class, goes, right, who's not meant to be here? I'm like, okay. She goes, I'm going to do a register. I'm going to count you. And I know who's not meant to be here. So you better stand up. All right. So then me and another guy stand up. She goes, get out now. And she said, what's your name? She said, I'll be looking for you later. I'm like, okay. So I go, come back like 4 o'clock, sit there, shamed, do my lecture. It was awful. Anyway, So fast forward 6 months later, I go to get a job in mental health during the 2nd to 3rd year summer holidays. And I'll go to this mental health hospital, which is kind of like it's now a grade 2 listed building. It's an old style asylum, as was like in the 40s or 50s, but it became a mental health hospital. So it reminded me, when you look at it, it looks like Arkham Asylum, like from Batman. It looks like that. Big, really old kind of classic type building, fantastic building, but out in the middle of nowhere. And so I go there, and I'm stood outside the physio department, and on the wall, there's all pictures of the staff. And I'm looking at the staff, and I'm like, and then I get to the manager of the department, and I'm like, oh, no, it's that lecturer. I'm like, oh no. And there's a look of like shock on my face, and I hear a voice behind me, hello. And I turn around, I'm like, it's her. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, my heart just like sinks, because I'm going to be her assistant throughout and we're walking along, right? And she's showing me around, and we must be like 2 minutes into the walk round, and she says to me, I know you from somewhere, don't I? No, I've got a very familiar face, but you don't know me. And she goes, I do. I know you from somewhere. I'm like, no, I don't. I kicked you out of a lecture, didn't I, 6 months ago? Yeah. And so she got me banged to rights there. She turned out to be the nicest person ever in the end. And we ended up working together in an outpatient department. And she was doing a master's degree in acupuncture. And we were talking about it one day. And she goes, oh, you should do that. And so I did, because I didn't want a master's degree. I just wanted to know more about acupuncture. I was already doing it, but I wanted to know a little bit more. So I phoned up to do an interview for it, at which point they told me I'd be no good, because I phoned up, spoke to a lady for an interview, and I told her what I'd done before, worked in football and stuff like that. She goes, this won't be any good for you. You don't want to do this. And that person was Dr. Vale Hopwood, who was the chair of the AACP. I've ended up over the years having a number of her jobs, and she became a mentor to me. So the mental health lady wasn't very nice, became a mentor. Vale Hopwood, who turned me down for the masters, she became a mentor, and ended up working with her a lot. We published articles together and stuff as well. So I eventually talked her into letting me on the course, which I did a master's degree, and that was over 3 years. I had to go weekends to do that. But I was just interested in learning about acupuncture from a clinical perspective. The master's degree was not on my radar at the time. Like, academia wasn't where I was at. It was about treating patients. But once I got into that, first year was a postgraduate certificate, second year is a postgraduate diploma. And then once I'm 2 years in, I'm thinking, no, I'm going to see this through. I'll do the master's while I'm here. Did the dissertation, got that finished, got my master's degree in that, 2004. And then just kind of like slowly kind of grew from there and stuff that I did. So yeah, that's a few of my jobs that I've had in physio, and how I come to be doing acupuncture as well.
How big a thing was acupuncture and needling then?
How big was it then, or how big was it then for me?
How big was it then? Like, how big in terms of other clinicians using it? How widely used was it?
There was in the trust that I worked in, there was quite a few clinicians using it. What I found though is that a lot of people use it in a very traditional way. Like, there are different ways of using it, and I suppose now I've I use it in a very traditional way. And to be honest, and this will probably surprise a lot of people, is like it may do when I say that my big thing is actually exercise, but I'm known for acupuncture. But I actually stopped doing acupuncture years ago and turned my back on it, because I found that it wasn't yielding the results that I wanted. And so I was using it in a very specific way. And I didn't really understand it, to be honest. So a bad workman blames his tools. And so I was like, oh, acupuncture is not great. I'm going to turn my back on it. And I see a lot of physios do this. And so what happened then is I put it to one side, and I did a lot more exercise, a lot more manual therapy based things. There were plenty of physios doing it, but as a kind of, like as an adjunct, as something a bit quiet on the side. And the way it was used back then, which I don't really like, is that you'll treat someone, and if you can't get them better, at the end, you might try some acupuncture, kind of like a cursory, let's throw it at it and see if it sticks kind of approach. And I was guilty of that as well, because that's the kind of way I'd kind of been indoctrinated into it. And so I turned my back on acupuncture, did more manual therapy, more exercise. And then what happened is I had a few patients who just weren't responding to treatment. And so I didn't know what to do. So I pulled out some acupuncture, and it worked really, really well on them. And then I tried it on a couple of other people and it started to work really well. And then I started to perhaps just reshape and rethink and reframe the way I thought about it, and started to think more about anatomy and physiology and mechanisms, and start to break it down structurally. And that was a turning point for me as well. And that kind of led to the way I teach now and the way I talk about it. And something really interesting, like a few years ago, I had a bunch of guys from the US, I think about 2017, 2016, 2017. A bunch of guys from the US flew over to the UK to train with me. And they'd come because they'd seen my name on a number of courses and my name had come up in conversations. So they decided to check me out, came over, did a course with me. When we'd finished the course, they didn't tell me this at the time. Once they finished the course, they came to me afterwards and said, oh, they all teach dry needling in the States and they're all tutors. They've been doing it for years. And I was like, oh, geez, well, thanks for telling me. I made an idiot of myself in front of everybody. And they said, no, we really like what you said. Would you come to America and teach? And so, yeah, go to America. You got to pay. Of course I'll go, you know. So I went to America and I didn't know what they knew. I didn't know anything about what Americans did as far as physio is concerned, what they call physical therapy. I wasn't enlightened to that. So I went and I taught a course there, and they wanted some advanced concepts. So I don't know what advanced is. So as far as other people are concerned, because people are at different levels. So I went and I talked about my take on it, basically, not necessarily what acupuncture books say or not what other people say, but my spin on it, how I was using it clinically, my thought processes, and so on. And I did like a 4-day seminar practical series in that. And everyone in the room, I didn't know this at the time, but everyone in the room was an instructor, worked for different organizations. There was different professors from different universities. There were guys from different medical institutions. There was guys from the Navy SEALs. Everyone was a big deal, and everyone had been invited privately, and it would have been a personal invitation from the guy who was running it. I didn't know that. I thought they were just running a course, you know. And it wasn't till afterwards that I found out, and everyone was very complimentary. And the guy who was hosting it came to me afterwards and he said that went down really well. He said couldn't have gone any better. I'm like, really? Because I just talked about my take on stuff. And he went, oh, this is where we need to be. And at the time I was calling that kind of like process, because what it does, I take from anywhere, you know, whether it's like traditional acupuncture, Western medical, dry needling, trigger point needling, intramuscular stimulation, which is like Jons approach, doesn't really matter. The common denominator is there's a needle involved, and that's it. And so I take a clinically reasoned approach. So we take the pathophysiology of the problem and we break that down and what's going on. And we take the physiological mechanisms of putting a needle in and what happens. And there's numerous things that happen. You know, I explain to my patients and students, like, there's 5 main reasons I'm going to put a needle in somebody. First one is for the healing response, for the inflammatory reaction. Second one is for the opioid response in that area. Third one, you'll get myofascial changes. Fourth one, you'll get stimulus to the nerves and you get segmental effects. And the fifth one is you'll get central effects. So what I say to guys is, which one of those do you want? You'll get all 5 of them. But when you look at a patient and you're thinking about introducing it, tell me which one you're doing, because you've got to drive the clinical reasoning. It's not good enough just to put needles in people and hope for the best. Yeah, you'll get that. But let's try and be a little bit more precise and smarter about what we're doing, you know. And there's layers and layers to this. So I have all these different, like, 5 reasons for this, and there's 5 levels of tissue, and there's 3 things you need to know, and so it's all kind of like bulleted down in this system. And they asked me what it was called, and I said I call it a dynamic integrated needling system. Dynamic because it changes as you use it. You know, you do different things with it. Dynamic because it can change not only in treatment, but it'll change like with you when you're doing things. Also dynamic because it kind of like grows as a system. It's not stationary, it changes depending on the things that you're presenting. Integrated because we integrate different types of needling. We integrate it with exercise and manual therapy, and we integrate it with, you know, psychology, mental health, so on. It fits in with everything. It isn't just like, oh, let's do some acupuncture. You've got to be thinking about the bigger picture, you know. I talk about respect the patient, respect the anatomy, respect the technique, and the patient comes first. So that's the most important person in the room. It's not you, it's the patient. So you've got to think about that. And it's a needling system. So I was calling it dynamic integrated needling system. And they were like, yeah, we really like that. What does it mean? And I explained what it means. And one of the one of the advantages I'd got with going to the US is in the UK, I have to teach in a certain way because physios expect a certain thing. But when I went to the US, I was given the opportunity to think, right, if I was going to teach acupuncture or dry needling for the first time ever without anyone else's system, how would I do it? You know, get rid of all the idea of meridians or all the idea of dry needling with hitting muscles or any of these things. If you could start afresh, what would you do? It's a little bit like having a business, you know, like if you start your own business, it grows organically with you and you end up in a position where you do things the way you do because that's how they grew. And sometimes you look at business and go, do you know what, if I could start this afresh, I would do it this way. These procedures would look like this. So going to the US, I've been given that opportunity. So I basically restructured the way I taught and created like a different system. The thing was, in the US, they then said, we need to name it after you. I'm like, no, can't use my name. I'll just get trashed in the UK. That if you put something out and put your name on it, it's like, particularly being in the North, well, you know what that's going to be like. He says, that's not going to go well for you, is it? And they said, trust me, we're going to do this. We're going to brand it. We're going to put your name on it. Right. I said, okay. And so they branded it and they put my name on it and they came up with a name for the system. And it's got my name on it, and it's out in the US. And what happens is people just picked up on the idea. They just like the idea that it's got a system, there's a structure. And what was going on in the US is everyone was teaching just trigger point needling, which is just, you just take the muscle, take a tender spot in the muscle, and you just stick the needle in, and that's it. And then you're kind of done. And it has a limited effect. It has limited options. It's a technique like anything else. But if we're looking at the mechanisms, it has a limited effect on the mechanisms. So if you take things like traditional acupuncture and dry needling and Western medical acupuncture and all different sort of ideas, that's what my system does. It's almost like, I describe it, it's almost like the MMA of like acupuncture. So when I used to train martial arts, I used to train in Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee style. And the philosophical concept of Jeet Kune Do, which is an amalgamation of martial arts, is use what's useful, discard what's not, add what's specifically your own. And so that is my sort of mantra really for the sort of needling I do. If the technique's good, I use it. If it's not, I get rid of it, you know, and then I'll make stuff up and add it in. But when I make stuff up and add it in, there has to be a physiological reason why I think it's going to work. And then I experiment with it and see what it does. If it works, I keep it. If it doesn't, it goes. So my system is very much about being a clinically practical approach. So it's very structured. It's very driven by anatomy and physiology and clinical reasoning. But that going to another environment has allowed me to create that how I'd like to, as opposed to trying to shoehorn my concepts into something else. And people might say, well, that's a bit ego driven. You like your concepts, you know, but it's not really like that. And, you know, I'll give credit where it's due, you know. And it's also the case that that's how I practice. You know, it's a reflection of our practice, but I'm not trying to create in a class, I'm not trying to create a dozen clones. What I'm trying to do is teach people how to fish, teach people how to reason themselves. And that's why it's dynamic, because you can just do what you want with it then. Providing you're respecting the patient and you're considering non-malevolence, which is do no harm, and beneficence to do good, then you're all good, you know. So it's a bit of a kind of a freer system, but it works very well clinically. So I don't use the name in the UK, but does that. Yeah, in the States, they love it there. They sent me a logo. The logo's awesome. It looks like something off the side of the Avengers building. Brilliant. Couldn't get away with that here. Love it in America. The other thing was, when they first sent me the logo designs, and I was trying to suppress my typical Britishness. It's a funny thing, isn't it? You know, if an American wants to get rid of a Brit, all you need to do is go up to him and compliment him, and we'll run away in self-loathing and shame because we can't be complimented about anything. So they came to me with these logos, and I'm like suppressing the self-loathing while they're showing me. And they got a Union Jack on there as well. I'm like, that's too much. You need to take the Union Jack off. Okay, I'll wear the suit and I'll improve my accent when I get there. But I'll go a little bit more Hugh Grant for you if you want. But they think I sound like that anyway. Until I pointed out Peaky Blinders to them. And then they were like, oh yeah, I get it now. In fact, I was in India last year, and a few people had a problem with my accent. And I said, is anyone familiar with Peaky Blinders? And the whole room was like, yeah, we love Peaky Blinders. We get your accent now. So, there we go.
That's amazing. So how much of your time now is spent in terms of teaching, but also in terms of spending time in the States?
Yeah, it's mixed. I mean, so I haven't been to the States since last March. I was due to go there when the lockdown started. I was due to be there for a month. I should have done 3 tours last year. Each tour's about 3 or 4 weeks. And I go to different states and I meet with different guys and just, do treatments and talk about stuff. I was with the New Orleans Saints early part of last year. I got invited by a friend of mine who teaches out there. We've done some courses together in the past, and she reached out to me very graciously and said it'd be fun if I came over, and she'd been invited to do some work with the Saints because she's very big in sport in the US, and she does a lot of needling. And I've taught her on a couple of courses. So, I mean, I'm not her original tutor, but, done a few courses together. So she asked me if I'd be interested in going over there, and it was a great opportunity. And it was very kind of her to ask, because obviously that's her people and that's her crowd, so to bring me into that was very good of her. And I was very excited to be there. I was probably too excited. I was like, we'll do this. And she's like, calm down. So that's a great opportunity over there.
Who's that, John? It's not Sue Falsone, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, she's great. I've had her on one of these actually, so no, she's.
Oh, have you? Yeah. Sue, yes, I know Sue very well. So she came to the UK to do some training with me.
Oh, brilliant.
And, so we worked together over there with the Saints, and that was great. And I'm hoping to get back over there in June. So my time spent really, total time, I hope to get like a few months a year around the world. So whether it's the US or India, I teach in Dubai as well, and maybe go out for a few weekends to do courses there with guys. And again, when I'm talking to some guys in the US and some particular organisations about what they want, and what I like to do is understand, rather than me turning up and teaching a standard course sometimes. Yes, I've got my programs that I teach, and I've got guys in the US who teach my programs as well. But it's the case that what I want to do is make sure that people get what they want. So I talk very much about N=1, which is treating the individual. How do you solve the individual problem? And the other thing is talking about Monday morning techniques. So what are you going to learn on this course that you can apply on Monday morning to solve a problem? Here's all the theory, but what are you going to take away in your hands that you can use that's going to be practical for you? So when I deal with an organisation, whether it's like EIS or like a Premiership club or the military or whatever, when it's a specific organisation like that, I'll say to them, what sort of things are you seeing? What sort of problems are you seeing? Where do you need the help? Because you don't know what you don't know. And so they don't necessarily know where they want to be upskilled. So if I ask them, well, what problems are you seeing and what are you doing about those? And they'll give me a few answers. I go, okay, right, I know where we can go now. I can show you some inroads into this pathology or that pathology or whatever. I can show you how to make your exercises more effective by addressing X, Y, and Z. Or, if I do A, B, and C, X, Y, and Z becomes more accessible for you. And it becomes a way of facilitating your outcome. It's not the be all and end all. It has a certain level of physiological response, but if it can get you to where you want to be quicker, that's why you use it. It's just that. So time spent, I'm these days I'm in clinic quite a bit still, have been last 20 odd years, teaching in the UK, rebuilding my teaching here now the lockdown's easing up, rebuilding stuff for the AACP, and looking to build that US, going to India as well, hopefully at the end of the year. I'm in Dubai in October. Anybody's out there, come say hi. So US, November and June so far. See what happens in between that. See where people want me to go. I'll go anywhere. Talk to anyone about anything.
No, that sounds great. It's really exciting, that development of that area. You mentioned about the private practice that you kind of took ownership of. So how much were you working in that private clinic while all of this was developing?
Yeah, so I worked in there pretty much full-time to start with, and I went kind of part-time, and I locumed. I then ended up having my own private practice. which started off as a single room in a gym and then ended up with quite a big building. And then, excuse me, then 2014, yeah. 2014, I was working in private practice. I had my own stuff going on there. I was doing teaching at the clinic, big clinic. I was renting out rooms for consultancies, so physicians coming in there and doing things. And so we got a nice little sort of operation going on. And I was training a lot back then. I trained in MMA for years. I used to write for an MMA magazine. I've got an MMA podcast now. So my background with MMA goes back before it was called MMA, when it used to call it NHB, which is like no holds barred. So that goes back nearly 30 years. And basically what happened is I was training 3 times a day. I would run like 5K in the morning, then I'd do 10 rounds on the bags like boxing. Then I'd go into work, and then I'd come home and maybe do some private lessons, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and things like that. And then I would train at night as well. I had my own gym in the garage. It was all matted out, and have guys over and we'd spar and we'd drill techniques and things like that. And I was choking everybody out. And fancy myself as a bit of a ninja, but I was a little bit old to like compete by then. I was in my 40s then. And what happened was when I was running on the treadmill, if I was doing any conditioning, and I'd get on the treadmill and I would run on it, and then I would turn the treadmill up faster and faster and faster and faster till it's going flat out. So like at the end of it, I am sprinting as fast as I can. And when I was doing that, the back of my left hand would go numb just there. That was it. And I didn't think too much of it. And my ex-wife at the time, so I was separated then, divorced, and she said, I'd mentioned it to her. We got on, so I mentioned it to her, and she said you should get that checked out, and I dismissed it for a while. Went to get it checked out because I thought to myself, I'm going to get some life insurance. I've got my own clinic, I've got 4 kids, divorced, but obviously I support the kids, so I thought if anything happens to me, what's going to happen to them? I need to get some life insurance. So applied for life insurance. And at the same time, I was getting this numbness on the back of my hand. And so I went to see a GP. It was a protracted sort of thing. GP didn't want to do anything about it. Oh, you'll be fine. And I'm like, well, I've had heart surgery as a child. Maybe I should get it checked out. Oh, you'll be fine. You've got no problem. Listen to my chest. Nothing wrong with you. I'll send you to a cardiologist anyway, just to shut you up. It was a locum GP. So sent me to a cardiologist. I told the cardiologist what they said. And I told the cardiologist what the GP said. Cardiologist hits the roof and examines me and like, no, you need an angiogram. Now we need to look at your heart. So look at my heart, and they turn around and say, yeah, you're fine. Away you go. You're fine. I was like, you sure? They said, yeah. So what about the numbness in the hand? They said, no, it'll be fine. But I'll tell you what, I'll send you to a specialist, see what they think, but you'll be fine. Anyway, in the meantime, I applied for life insurance and they turned me down. And they sent me a letter saying I can't have life insurance because I've got an aneurysm. And I contact my cardiologist and say, what's the deal with this? He said, don't worry, I'll write him a letter. It'll be fine. I said, not insurance, not worried about insurance. I've got an aneurysm. He goes, yeah, you'll be fine. He said, everyone with your surgery's got one. So what we didn't realise is when you had your surgery 45 years ago, the repair, so I had what's called a coarctation. So the aorta is malformed. So it's very, very narrow. So if you imagine like a piece of hose pipe and it's taking all the blood out from the heart to the rest of the body, it's crimped down. So very little blood can get through. So as you grow, it doesn't get any bigger. So circulation to the rest of your body gets cut off. And so the operation they did at the time was to cut it, open it, and they sew a patch in, a Dacron patch, which is like a kind of like nylon, doesn't rot. So they tie that in there. What had happened over 45 years is the continuum pulsum of my aorta had the scar tissue had stretched next to the graft and had formed an aneurysm. So you know, like on an inner tube where you get that sort of like blowing out on the inner tube. It was that, and it was 6 centimeters, which is massive for an aortic aneurysm. And what was happening basically was under high pressure, the blood was getting pushed into the aneurysm, and the aneurysm was expanding, and it wasn't going down the subclavian artery. So as a result, my left hand wasn't getting circulation, and that's why it was going numb. And that's the only symptom I had. But it had to be under high pressure, like training, high intensity training. So what happened was, I had some tests. They said I was fine, sent me away. Sent me a letter 12 months later, saying that everything was fine, didn't need to worry about anything, I was going to be okay. The next day, after I received the letter, look at it, everything's going to be fine. I'm like, okay, it's just one of them things. I get a phone call saying, we want you to go to get some kidney function tests. I'm like, what for? Just go get the kidney function tests and then call us afterwards. So I'm like, okay, get the kidney function test, call us. They're like, yeah, we need to see you. I'm like, what for? I said, well, we've been discussing your condition like every week for the last 12 months. And I said, well, you said I was fine. They said, we changed our mind. You need to come and see us. So I go and see them. They sit me down, they talk to me. They said, right, you're going to need surgery. And I said, and this was like in February 2014. And I'm like, okay, well, I do a lot of lecturing. Can it wait to July? They're like, no, it needs to be in the next 2 weeks at least. I'm like, really? And they said, yeah. Why? They said, well, you got a 6-centimeter aneurysm and it's going to rupture any minute. And if it ruptures, you'll die. And I said, okay, how do you know? Like it's going to rupture? I said, well, the problem is that we don't know how long you've got because your condition was caused by surgery 45 years ago. And we don't really have anyone of your age now to tell. So any minute, you know, I'm like, right. And what happens if it ruptures? He said, you won't survive that. I'm like, okay. So they're going to do surgery. So what they decide they're going to do, they were going to do open my chest. They tell me that's too dangerous. So what they're going to do is they're going to reroute the subclavian artery to my carotid artery in my neck. So there's 2 surgeries. And then a couple of weeks later, if I'm well enough, they're going to stent my aorta. And they send me to an interventionist who is like a radiologist who does procedures. So going to the interventionist, he scans me, sits me down, says, I can't do the procedure. So like, why not? He said, your femoral artery is 6.7 mil in diameter, and the stent will only collapse to 7 mil. He said, it's not going to get in your femoral artery. He said, so I'll have to get a surgeon in. We'll open your abdomen, we'll insert it into the abdominal aorta, and we'll stent you that way. He said, but the problem is, because it's such a big procedure, you might go into cardiac arrest. And if you do, I'll have to get a cardiothoracic surgeon to open your chest and we'll do it manually. I'm like, okay. Then they come back to me and say, we can't do that. It's too dangerous. I'm like, okay, what are we doing then? He said, we're going to go back to plan A. I'm like, well, you said plan A was too dangerous. And they're like, yeah, we changed our mind. I said, so what are you going to do? I said, what we're going to do, I'm going to drop your core temperature, I'm going to pack you in ice, drop your core temperature. So it's going to take 3 hours. If we do it any quicker, the blood will freeze in the blood vessels and you'll die. So we're going to do that. I'm going to drop your core temperature down about 20 degrees. We're going to open you up. He said, we've got a window of opportunity there of about 3 hours to operate. We're going to take your aorta out. I'm going to give you a new one. Okay. And what happens, he says, we'll just put your head on bypass. The rest of you will be so cold, you'll be in stasis. And then we'll repair it. You'll get a stenotomy, a thoracotomy, we'll stitch it in. And then we'll close you up, we'll bring you back up to temperature. We'll take you to intensive care. He said, you'll be in intensive care for as long as it takes you to get back to room temperature, which will be about as long as you were down, 8 or 9 hours, and then we'll wake you up and we'll see how you are. I'm like, okay. So I said, when are we doing that? I said, next 2 weeks. All right. 2 months went by and they hadn't contacted me. And I'd got a private clinic. I've got 4 kids who were quite young. I'm divorced, but my ex-wife was got a house and the kids, and I'm supporting them. And so what happened was I had to make some decisions, you know. So I phoned the hospital up and I eventually got to speak to the consultant. I said, look, we need to put some time frame on this. I can't have this over me all the time. And so basically what happened is I got him to agree to July, gave me a date. And then I decided that I was going to sell the clinic and get out of it and so on. And so that's what I did, basically. I decided that if I was going to spend the next like 3 months of my life waiting for surgery, I was going to do what I wanted to do. So I decided I was only going to treat certain types of conditions and I wasn't going to stress myself and these sorts of things. And I was going to get rid of the clinic. But the reason being is the lease for the building was signed off against the mortgage of the house. So I had to break the connection between me and, you know, my ex-wife and the kids, because they could lose their dad, their income, and their house all in one go. And any one of those things is too traumatic for a child, let alone like all 3 in one go. So I decided I was going to like step back from the clinic. So at the time, just before that, I'd gone to sell my clinic, and Rick Carter had been down to see it. And so you know Rick, don't you? Yeah. And So Rick actually was really good to me. He came down, I told him what was going on. He said, right, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll send my staff to you. They can treat the patients. He said, don't worry about anything. He said, I'll tell them not to bother you. He said, they'll just come down and treat your patients. And that's what he did. He sent his staff to come down, never bothered me. I said, what about the money? He says, we'll deal with that some other time. So don't worry about that. So there was a good chance he wasn't going to get paid, because if I didn't make it, he wasn't getting any money. But he was cool about everything, and so were his guys. And that was really good of him, because he and I weren't really friends then, you know, and he reached out and like, helped me out, which I'm always appreciative of. So basically, time came to go for the surgery. I taught a course on the last day, locked up the building, took the keys, gave them to my mum, got in a car, drove to Birmingham to the QE. And they were going to operate the next day. Next day came, they didn't operate because there was only one team in the country who could do the surgery. And they were a transplant team, and they were a specialist transplant team. And they're at the QE in Birmingham. Transplant came in, they cancelled my surgery. So next day, I'm waiting for the surgery. Transplant came, cancelled my surgery. And then they came to me on 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Consultant walks in, and he's like jeans and a t-shirt. And he's like, right, he said, we're going for surgery in the morning. Whatever happens now, whatever comes in tonight, you're going for surgery at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, well, who's on the list? He said, there is no list. There's just you. That's it. And I said, well, how long is it going to take? He said, well, if it goes well, about 8 or 9 hours. I said, if it goes badly? I said, it takes as long as it takes. You know, that's it. And I said, are you operating? He said, well, I'm not. He was a consultant. He said, but he's not the professor. There's only the one guy leads it. He said, but he's assisting him. And I said, at 7 o'clock in the morning. He's like, yeah. I said, well, get your ass off home now. I don't want you here at 11 o'clock. Get some sleep. I want you bright-eyed in the morning. Next time I see you, no t-shirt and jeans. It's either shirt and tie or scrubs. Behave yourself. Get out. So we go 7 o'clock next morning. I go down, and I just kind of make my peace with the world. You know, it's kind of an odd thing. You know, everyone's being told the time and date that you're going to die, because obviously I could die from not having the surgery. But when they consented me for the surgery, they said, right, here's the thing about the surgery. We're removing your aorta. So there's a chance that you'll die, or spinal cord paralysis from the loss of circulation to the spinal cord, or infection, or you'll be okay. And I'm like, okay, and what's the alternative if I don't have the surgery? They said, aneurysm or rupture and you'll die. And I said, when? Any minute. That's it. There's your choices, death or maybe death. And so when you confront that, it changes your perspective on things. So I do have a very sort of large dose of not caring about stuff these days. Depends what it is. I care about some things, don't care about others. But so I made my peace with the universe. To put this into perspective, I picked songs for the kids for the funeral. I wrote a letter to the kids. I did the whole thing. I made my peace with the world. And then I went for surgery. But something that occurred to me, in the lift down to the theatre, it kind of occurred to me that if I was going to die, it wasn't going to be here by myself, alone, in an operating theatre somewhere. That I'd got this kind of like motivation that I was going to be okay, it's all going to be fine. And so that's kind of where my head was at going into it. I was very positive. Got down to anesthesiology, anaesthetist there, he's putting the line in, and he said, it's busy in there already. I said, really? He says, 5 surgeons in there. And I said, is that how many it takes? He said, no, yours isn't here yet. He said, they've just come to watch. And I was like, really? He said, yeah, you're a big deal today. We don't have many of these in. I'm like, brilliant. So had the surgery. Next thing I know, I wake up in intensive care, and I woke up like just burst like up, sat upright, bolt upright. In my head, you know, I was at peace with the idea of dying completely. Didn't bother me. What bothered me was if I was paralyzed coming out of that, that's a paradigm shift, and that's a reevaluation of my life and what that means. And so that I was more concerned about where I would be with that. So when I came around, the first thing I did, I sat up, bolt upright in bed, checked my hands and my feet. I thought, okay, I can deal with anything else. It's all going to be okay. Sat back down, and then the rest is history, and made my comeback from there. Actually ended up having to do my own cardiac rehab because they never sent me for any. Luckily, I had written a course on cardiac rehab before that. What's the chances on that? That I'd written one, because I'd written a lot of exercise courses in the past and degrees and things for different unis. So I'd written a course. And I was supposed to have 3 months off. I had 6 weeks off, went back to teach him because I was bored. And the things that I have now, so the AACP chairmanship, all the teaching that I do, my own training company, you know, the books that are coming out, the articles, all those things, going abroad and stuff, all those came after the surgery. New beginning, new start. I sold everything. I hadn't got anything after the surgery. I got nothing. So I started again from scratch with that, you know, and so everything I have now is built from then. I should also mention I have an invention as well, but that's for another day. We'll talk about that another time.
How long was the surgery, Jon?
Sorry?
How long was the surgery?
Surgery was about 9 hours. I was told that I would be in intensive care for a couple of days and then on the ward for 6 days. Oh, no, sorry, on the ward for 10 days. As soon as I woke up, after a couple of hours, I asked the nurse if I could get out of bed. I got central lines in. I wanted to go to the toilet. I was catheterised, but I wanted to go to the toilet. And she said, "You got a catheter in?" I'm like, "No, but I can't go." I said, "Can I sit out?" And she was like, "I'm going to need a physio." I said, "Tell you what, I'm a physio. I'll talk you through it. We'll be fine." So basically, that's what happens. I talk her through. We get out, get the catheter out, and go to the toilet. Central line's still in. And then I got bored, and I say, "Well, can I go to the ward now?" And she's like, "Well, you've got to stay here for a bit." Okay. Surgeon comes around, and the thing that struck me was how nice everybody was. Every time a surgeon came around, surrounded by guys that come over, shake my hand, really, really. I said, "These are the nicest guys ever." It's only later on, in retrospect, that I realised I don't think they'd expected me to do so well, and I think they were quite surprised that. Firstly, I was alive, and secondly, that I was sat up in bed talking to him. Because every time a surgeon had come in, he'd usher a load of other consultants in who'd come over and meet me, and I'm like, "They're so friendly." I was on morphine. They're like so friendly. But I think, I say retrospectively, I think they were just very pleased that it went as well as it did. So I went home after 6 days. I mean, it wasn't great. I mean, I'd got a huge stenotomy. They actually came to see me, and they were explaining the next day that what they'd done is they'd done the stenotomy, then implanted the artificial aorta, and my carotid arteries and my subclavian are stitched to an artificial graft. And then what's supposed to happen is the tail end of the graft is supposed to be inserted into the abdominal aorta, and then they go in through the side of your chest through a thoracotomy and stitch it in. And what they said to me is, "Oh, we couldn't open your side of your chest." They said, "You've had 2 thoracotomies, and the scar tissue was so bad from your childhood, we daren't open you. So what we've done is we've inserted it and expanded it, and it should grip. You should be okay, but it's not stitched in." But it's been okay so far. I train, I go running, I box, I do weights. You know, I'm okay. I feel like a little bit Deadpool. Can't die now. I'm like Weapon X. You know.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's amazing. What an incredible story. Do you think it's changed you as a person then? Has it had a big impact on the way that you look at things?
Yeah, you know, I'm pretty positive about stuff. You know, one of the things I say to my kids when there's a problem, I say, look, as long as no one dies, we can solve it. There are no problems, just things you've got to be dealt with. So I'm very positive about stuff. I like to spread that positivity, that energy when I'm teaching. I like to encourage. I like to try and I don't want to use the word inspire because that's a little bit much, you know. But I like to just get people on board with the idea that they can learn stuff and everyone can improve, and nobody should tell you where you should be or what you should be doing, and grow. And if you're interested in something, get hold of it and go with it. Doesn't matter what it is. Find something you love doing, do that. You know, It sounds like I work a lot from the things that I do. If I reel off all the things that I do, you know, lecture at different universities and different courses and books and things like that, and people think, "Oh my God, you work a lot." Do you know what? I don't. I haven't worked a day in years because I enjoy everything I do. You know, so it isn't like it's work. But having been to a place where you think it's all going to end, you're very appreciative for everything that you've got. You know, and I think that's an interesting perspective because it doesn't matter what kind of happens to me. You know, every day I'm grateful that I'm here. You know, and every day, I mean, I've been living on borrowed time since I was 10 days old. You know, for the amount of people who didn't survive that surgery as childhood and didn't go on to do the things that I've done and experience the things I've done and be where I am. So yeah, very philosophical, very optimistic. You know, just take any challenge as it comes. I do what I like. Within, you know, when I say I do what I like, you know, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to get into anyone else's space or anything like that. But I have a healthy disdain for authority, probably. Yeah. So just do what makes you happy.
No, well, I think that's an amazing place to finish on, really. So that, I mean, yours genuinely is a fascinating story.
Thanks.
So I'm looking forward to doing that, and obviously working with you going forward on things. It's a really exciting time with the growth of your courses and education. So no, I really appreciate your time and telling us your story.
Thanks, mate. Wait until I come back. I'll tell you all about my invention, and that's a whole other story as well.
Well, definitely we'll do that. I'll get you back on, whether it's on this one or another thing. But
yeah.
We'll do it. But Jon, appreciate your time and great speaking with you.
Thank you, Andy. You take care of yourself, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers.